And get started? No, because it's going to be a few more minutes. Okay, it is 6:35, I believe, and we'll call to order. Madam Clerk?
Mayor Trumpman.
Here.
Vice Mayor Johnson Sardella. Here. Commissioner Bill. Here. Commissioner Ross.
Here.
Commissioner Tudor.
He will be coming in about 15 minutes. He's running late in traffic.
Thank you.
Can we stand for the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I do want to take a minute this evening. There's been just a tremendous amount of hurricane damage between Harvey, Irma, and Maria. Not my three favorite names at the moment, as is many folks. I just wanted to take a moment of silence because there's been so many people affected throughout our state, especially in Monroe, Collier counties, and so many areas, as well as the folks right now in Puerto Rico, Cuba, and many of the Caribbean islands, St. Croix, and so forth. So I just want to take a moment of silence to recognize those victims. Thank you. Thank you. This evening's meeting is for the sole purpose of the first reading for the budget, to adopt a budget for this year. I want to recognize and spend another moment recognizing all of our residents who have been absolutely tremendous through their patience in this heat with not having power. I do want to report that I think at this point we have one house, is that right? Two houses out of all the homes here that now everyone has electricity. I want to shout out to all the elected officials, both at the federal and state level, that helped grease the wheels to allow a whole lot more trucks to come in here and help repair our village. Within a couple of days, we had almost 630 homes put online within 2 or 3 days. I also want to spend a bit of time thanking the staff. In case you don't know this, our chief and our village manager lived here. They lived here for over 7 days, and they never once wavered on any request that a resident needed. Our public works crew have been absolutely outstanding. Our officers have been incredible. One story you do not know, and I will tell it so that I think it's important for everybody to hear, is that your chief and 2 officers went out in the middle of the storm to help somebody who got hurt. These are not stories that you get told, and they keep it quiet, and they're very humble. But it is incredible the amount of commitment that every single employee and staff member has shown to this village. It's also been incredibly inspiring to me to hear all the stories of people looking after the elderly and the disabled and the injured, and folks just for no reason at all showing up with a chainsaw to help one another. It really has been an inspiration to me, so I just wanted to take a moment to thank everyone as we move forward with debris removal and just getting our lives back in order. So thank you very much. Now we're going to open up for public comments related to the agenda items that are here. Are there any public comments? And please don't forget to sign in.
Yes. I can tell you this, Madam Mayor. We're going to have public hearings for each ordinance as well, but people can speak now if they want to rather do it up front.
Thank you so much.
Bob Anderson, 11th Place, 119th Street. I just want to urge all of you to, whatever budget you pass, hold off on any expenditures that you can possibly hold off on until you find out what our bill is going to be for this cleanup.
Thank you.
Janie Anderson, 11th Place, 119th Street. I don't want to wait till October's meeting to really piggyback on, Tracy, what you just said. We've got the most incredible staff and the most incredible... I mean, at the risk of sounding like a broken record...
I'm sorry. Ms. Anderson, could you lower the mic so we can...
Sorry.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
At the risk of sounding like a broken record, job incredibly well done. No matter what craziness got thrown your way or staff's way, nobody wavered. Nobody was anything less than the consummate professionals, and always with a great sense of humor and attitude. We are seriously lucky, and also thanks to all of you on the commission, because I think what's unfortunate is a lot of people don't realize much of what happens in this kind of situation is not visual. It's not what we see online. It's not what we see in front of our faces. It's what you guys all have to put up with and deal with behind the scenes. And you've got a grateful crowd. Now on to the budget. If you could work, I think you guys did an amazing job, and this year had to be tougher than normal to cobble together a budget. I like seeing some of the new programs and things, but I too have some concerns. Could you possibly tonight at least have a general discussion on how the whole FEMA process works? What is the approximate, and I know at this point it is a ballpark at best, approximate lag time till the reimbursement comes? What's the percentage? Because yes, I kind of have to agree that much as I'd like us to do a lot of moving, we might have to hold off just a little, but the one thing I hope we won't hold off on is the additional code officer, because I tell you, you're going to need that now more than ever. You are going to need a whole lot of people that need reminding, no, the village does not go on your property and cut your broken branches, etc. So, thank you.
Thank you, Janie.
Chuck Rossman, 1166 Griffin Boulevard. I just want to echo thank you to the staff and the administration and everyone that pitched in. So, Police Department, Public Works, Tracy, thank you. Everybody else, we really appreciate the hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Are there any other public comments? Just to remind everyone, there are public comments open before each passing of each ordinance. The first ordinance, and I'll go ahead and refer this to the attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. This is ordinance 2017-03. This is an ordinance of the Village Commission of the Village of Biscayne Park, Florida, establishing the 2017-2018 millage rate at 9.70 mils for each $1,000 of assessed valuation upon real and personal property within the village limits of the Village of Biscayne Park, providing for an effective date. Mayor, what we're doing today is, in this ordinance, is setting the millage rate, requesting to set the millage rate at this point at 9.70 mils per each $1,000 of assessed value. We need to announce that is 10.11% greater than the rollback rate of 8.8095. We are also establishing a second reading of this in the final passage of millage rate to occur on September 28th at 6:30 p.m. here at the log cabin. So if you open up to the public, then you can have your discussion.
Okay, I open up the public, but I first want to acknowledge, Madam Clerk, that Mr. Tudor just came in. Thank you. So once again, open for public comments. If anybody's a couple of comments on the 9.7 millage rate.
Yep.
You have to go to the podium and just state your name and address and go ahead and sign in.
My name's Alexander Bernhard. I live at 1015 120th Street. It's just a question, because I was kind of unclear from the way that the ordinance is written. Is the actual millage rate is staying the same, or is it increasing by 10%? Or is it increasing by 10% because of the aggregate value of all the homes increased by 10%?
Attorney Hearn, would you like to?
So what the state law requires, even if you keep the same rate, if the value of the homes have increased and you do not do what's called the rollback rate, which would make it lesser to collect the same amount of money. So although you're charging the same rate, because values have increased, you'll be collecting more. That's why it's called increase from the rollback rate. That's what that is.
Okay.
Same percentage, but the valuation's higher, so more money comes in.
Okay. All right. And is that increase of 10% for any specific program, or is it just because we're just doing it for the extra money on hand?
Well,
You want me to take that?
Yeah.
That's not for any specific program. We're currently a year behind on our audit. We are cleaning up a lot of old stuff in Village Hall, and we felt it was safer at this time not to reduce the millage rate. Additionally, we know that next year it's likely that our budget's going to take about a $300,000 hit, assuming the homestead exemption passes. And so we decided at this point to keep the millage consistent for this year. Next year we'll reevaluate it, and hopefully by then we'll be able to reduce it. That's our goal. But we also think that the changes in the homestead exemption next year as well, we are going to be taking a hit on the budget as well.
What are those changes in the homestead exemption?
It's an increase in the exemption for homeowners from, I believe it's from, is it?
25,000.
It's
Additional
25% extra.
$25,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dollars. So it will reduce, it will reduce the cost to homeowners, but it will also reduce the overall city budget by about $300,000.
And that hasn't passed yet.
That has not passed yet.
Okay.
But it will be, I believe, on the ballot in November. So
That's a ballot initiative? Okay.
it is a ballot initiative, and we really don't see that it won't pass
Yeah.
at this point. It's
Yeah.
sort of expected to.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to just prepare for the future a little bit.
Okay. Makes sense.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. Open up for discussion?
Should we make a
Commissioner Ross?
motion for discussion?
Make a motion for discussion?
I move that we approve ordinance 2017-3 for discussion on a first hearing.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody like to start?
I think the meat of our discussion might be in the actual budget of shifting around.
Okay, didn't know if anybody wanted to, okay. I'm going to start with Commissioner Ross. We'll just go ahead, and if you had a comment on, do you want to talk about each individual item, Commissioner Ross? Is that how you want to?
I think if the discussion's going to be on the budget, I'll read the next ordinance on the budget, if that makes sense.
I think she was
Should we
asking,
just close our vote on the first ordinance and then open up the discussion on the other?
Yeah, absolutely. The way that came down, it
Yeah, I
was
thought
weird.
you
I
were
thought
saying
you
not
actually
to.
just approved that ordinance, because you moved to
Right.
approve it.
But we have to approve it by a roll call vote, so...
Oh, you're absolutely right. Yep. So we could take a roll call on this and go to the second one if your discussion's budget-based. Thank you.
okay, so,
So right now you are voting on the millage.
correct.
Okay. Commissioner, Mayor Trumpman.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Johnson Sardella.
Yes.
Commissioner Bild.
Yes.
Commissioner Ross.
Yes.
Commissioner Tudor.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay. The next item is ordinance number 2017-04. That's an ordinance of the Village Commission of the Village of Biscayne Park, Florida, adopting a budget for fiscal year 2017-18 for the Village of Biscayne Park, Florida, providing for conflicts, providing for severability, providing for an effective date. Request to open the public hearing, approve, and set second reading for September 28th. At 6:30 p.m. Here.
Is there a motion to open for discussion?
I'm happy to make a motion to approve ordinance 2017-4 for discussion.
Open for discussion?
If you make an ordinance to approve it for discussion, then we have to make another motion to accept.
The approval of the ordinance is by roll call. This is just a discussion.
Okay. So all those in favor? Aye. Okay. Open for discussion? Anybody want to start? Actually, it might be better in this case to ask the manager. Is there anything you would like us to discuss on this?
Well, I think we can go through, Beatrice, I believe, made the corrections or changes from the last time. So you want to lead us through it, Bea?
Sure, I can give you the highlights on the budget. Okay, so let's start off with the general fund. The current budget that's being proposed right now totals $2.8 million, and it also reflects excess revenues of $197,000. So let's go back to how we got to that. As was previously stated, the current property values have increased by 10%. That's a total, the current property values are $195.2 million. The increase of 10% is $18.3 million, and that's the highest that it's been in approximately 10 years. Based on the proposed millage rate that was just adopted of 9.7, that generates $168,000 of additional ad valorem revenue for the village. And the ad valorem revenue represents 64% of all budgeted revenues within the general fund. Just a couple of highlights on the other revenues. The state shared revenues have been adjusted per estimates that are provided by the Department of Revenue. So you'll see those reduced, but that is at the government's or at the Department of Revenue's suggestion based on what they calculate and forecast coming down the pike. Building permits, licenses, and service charges, they've been evaluated based on historical collections, and we've budgeted those conservatively just to avoid any possible shortfalls in the upcoming year. So what you're looking at in your revenues overall is very conservative. The biggest line item, like I said, is your ad valorem revenues. We know that that's going to be coming in at the amount specified, and we are just trying to keep with the current economic growth. The total budgeted revenues are $2.8 million, and therefore we're working off of our operating expenses with that number. Overall, the budget, the operating expenses have been reduced by 4%, which is $122,000 over the current year budget. Like I said, that leaves a surplus or an excess revenue of $197,000, which I think at this point it's important to recognize that we're adding almost $200,000 to your bottom line, to your fund balance, so that that is something that we can definitely earmark for this particular disaster that we're facing. You know, we can and just say, you know, we're not sure what the cost is going to come in at with the debris removal and the reimbursement timing. You know, everything's still up in the air until we complete everything, but at least we know we're in a good position. We've got $200,000 that we can set aside at council's direction, and just know that we're not, you know, the sky's not falling, that we're in a good position. If you'd like, I can go into detail on certain departments, just...
I do want to make a comment, if I may, on the disaster and the costs. It has always been a 75, and please, if you want to go into this, you may. It's always been a 75-25 split, where FEMA would hopefully reimburse us for 75%.
Actually, it's a 75, 12.5, 12.5.
Right.
So there's 12.5 that's state.
The state pays.
So
right.
That leaves us paying 12.5.
Right. They had talked about trying to move it in the governor's conference. They have had some discussion on a 90-10-5, but that, with all the disasters happening, I'm just not confident that's going to occur.
So,
I'm sorry, Commissioner,
I'm
Vice Mayor, I'm sorry.
To interrupt you, I think I do want you to go through whatever the changes were from the last time, but to pick up on what Ms. Anderson said, I think, can we get an overall understanding of FEMA? I know we just talked about the percentages, but do we know the timing? My apologies. Do we know the timing of when we would get that reimbursement? Because I think we need to see, if we can, kind of have a discussion so we can have basically a fuller picture.
It's a little premature for that. I don't know. Have you heard anything, Beatrice, from any of your other municipalities on what the timeline might be for reimbursement from FEMA?
Well, I know that you have 60 days from the date that the disaster was declared to prepare to get the debris removed and to move forward with that. Now, as far as the timing, I mean, I know that sometimes you present several different packages to FEMA. So you might do an initial package for the initial work done and then have subsequent packages after that. And then it's all reviewed and audited by them. And it really depends on how well prepared your packages are, you know, or whether they get kicked back or questioned. So, you know, the reporting is very important on our part so that we present as clear and concise of a package with as much backup as possible so that none of it is denied or deobligated at any point. In my experience, FEMA reimburses and then they come back and do the auditing process. And at that point, there's possible deobligation. So It happens relatively quickly, depending on, how many packages you turn in, and I've never had any issues with, I think we've gotten kind of, I was talking to the manager earlier, a handle on how we're going to approach the subject when we first start doing it. I mean, at this point, we haven't even paid any of the contractors. So as the bills start piling up, we'll start putting it all together and requesting the reimbursement, and hoping that that they I mean, if this 90-10 waiver goes through, that would be fantastic. But we have to plan for the worst case scenario, which would be the 12.5% that we would be on the line for, and see how quickly we can move that through down the pike.
And I want to add, so everybody understands, we in the village are sitting incredibly lucky at this point. After spending days and weeks on governor's conference call since the storm, there's an enormous problem throughout the state with debris removal. And our contractor has honored that rate, but most have not. And so there is an there's a possibility that 60-day may be extended. I don't know that it is, but that is a possibility because so many places all over Florida are having enormous trouble getting the debris removed. So I just want to kind of share that with everybody.
That was it on my inquiry.
I think if timing could be more difficult, I kind of want to give everybody a picture of what you look at every day and that you've shared with me, and that is, and BU as well, is we have 2 audits that we still have to complete. Those audits will tell us how much money we really have. We're still in that process, so we're still a little bit blind from that perspective. Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
Okay. We have a budget we have to pass and come up with things we need to do in the village, but at the same time, we have to be incredibly cautious because now we have a cleanup that could cost quite a significant amount of money and that we have to wait reimbursement for. Would you please share what the cost of Wilma was, just to give an idea?
Sure. My understanding was that for cleanup for Hurricane Wilma, it was about $1.8 million. And so, I mean, from that perspective, and that's money that we will get reimbursed from FEMA, hopefully. I say hopefully, I'm pretty sure we will, but we're all, until we get the check and it cashes, I never want to count on it. Beatrice and I went through the bank accounts today and looked at everything, and currently we're sitting on about 1.7 million at cash at hand, all in. And so some of that CITT funds, all of that, but I don't think we will be having any expenditures for our contractors probably before mid to the end of October. And usually the ad valorem taxes, the revenues from that come in around Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. And so, we may be tight in that area. These are things that we can talk about at the commission meeting next week, one of which is one of the banks that we are looking at has offered us $1 million line of credit, which may, should we go with that bank, which may be something that we can work with to help bridge that gap if needed. I don't know that it will be needed, but it just from operating capital perspective, it may be. And so that's something we can look at.
Could you also share one more piece that the other commissioners are unaware of, that we had a state of emergency in which we had to make decisions about how to deal with certain items, and one of them had to do with the monitoring of FEMA. Could you go through that and tell so the other commissioners are aware that we did this?
Sure. We had to have, in order to get reimbursed by FEMA, we have to have a monitoring company, which means essentially someone to stand there, watch each truck be loaded, measure the truck, determine that it actually is a full truck, and and document all of this for FEMA. And we didn't have a monitoring company on contract prior to the hurricane. A few days before, when I realized this, I went looking for them, called every monitoring company I could find. They all were saying it's 2 days before a hurricane, our hands are full right now. I was able to locate one, and I believe I contacted all of you guys about it to let you know that we did contract with BC Peabody, and they are here doing the monitoring right now. Currently, their estimate is that that cost will be about $116,000 for the project. It's not going to be cheap, but we've looked at their costs, and I'm trying to negotiate that a little bit better. We were unfortunately under the wire when we, took the contract because we had to have someone there.
I do want to support you on this because you did, we did reach out to our sister city in North Miami Beach and our former city manager, Ana Garcia, and asked to look at their contract, and you want to share that the rates that we're getting are actually...
Yeah, our rates do appear to be competitive. They're probably a little bit higher. Most contracts I've seen the contract from North Miami Beach, the contract from Coral Springs as well. And they have it broken down with, different levels of management, throughout the whole monitoring process. Ours is a flat fee all the way across. Whether it's the lowest or the highest, we're still getting the flat fee. And it does seem to be competitive so far.
It actually, I was surprised, but it was competitive from what I could see.
Christian, is that a reversible
The monitoring?
Yeah.
Yes, it
Oh,
is.
it is. Okay.
It is. And so...
The only other inquiry I would have is that since it is something that's reimbursable by FEMA, and it's something that obviously is required by FEMA, the cost, hearing that number, I just want to make sure we're in the realm of what FEMA accepts to reimburse, and we won't have an issue on the back end that...
We're going to confirm that. This all sort of came to light today, and so we haven't had a chance to confirm that yet. But I think we are definitely within the realm of that.
And I will say that on the governor's conference call, every mayor that could talk, every city manager that was reaching out said, how much is too much? Can you give us a range? And the bottom line was, no, we cannot. We'll deal with it after you submit your paperwork. So there doesn't seem to be a preemptive approval that you can do like a pre-approval.
Yeah. I hate to come into a budget meeting and sound vague, but there are a lot of moving parts right now. And with FEMA, there always is. Yeah. And with a disaster like we've just had, it's different every time.
And Attorney Hearn, did you?
Well, the unique thing, FEMA treats each storm completely differently. There were storms in 2004, for example, where they allowed private communities, which you don't have here, cities to go into private communities and reimburse them. In 2005, they decided not to do that. Last year, they decided to do that again. So each storm, they move. It's a moving target, and you have 3 hurricanes because Puerto Rico is United States territory. So they're going to be very busy. Our estimates, from what I heard, would be it may not be till close to summer to get some of these reimbursements.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
If I could just make a comment. Have we reached out to FMIT, our blanket policy yet?
I have not. Marlon, have you reached out to FMIT?
If you had structural damage?
No.
We haven't at this time reached out to FMIT because we want to go ahead and assess what we have through FEMA and then determine what... FEMA should be the first one paying us rather than utilizing FMIT.
Okay.
Well, yeah, we'll reach out to FMIT if we haven't, because one of the things FEMA needs to see is your insurance policy rejecting. Now, for the trees, that's not an issue, but if there's any structural damage, which...
And we didn't have any structural damage.
Right. I just remember going to a seminar and being told that FMIT sort of provides gap funding.
Okay.
Until your FEMA money comes in. They make so that you can go ahead and engage your contractors and you don't have to empty your bank account to do it.
They have a policy that's called the turnkey policy, but what I learned in another city, that turnkey policy only happens if you meet your deductible. And in the 2 other cities, they didn't meet their deductible because it wasn't structural. So, but I still think that it's worth the phone call. So.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Also, I mean, obviously they know what cities have been hit and where the hurricane's path was, but just to start building that relationship, because there could be other resources we can tap into for assessments or to inspect areas, not trees necessarily, but maybe the rec center, the playgrounds, all that kind of stuff. The other thing I wanted to comment on is that if in the end we are only going to have to, we're only obligated for the 12.5 and the rest of the funding comes from somewhere else, even 12.5% of $1.8 million, if it reaches that, is going to be $225,000 that we'll need to find somewhere in the budget. And thank goodness we have reserves that would cover that, but we don't want to deplete our reserves either. So I think it's a wise thing what we did in passing the millage at 9.7.
Thank you, Commissioner Ross. Anybody else on the FEMA piece?
I guess my thought is even with the budget, as long as we still spend as little as we possibly can until we have some sort of an idea of what we are going to get back. And even if we pass this full budget, is just be judicious about what we're actually spending money on. Just because it's available, it doesn't mean we have to spend it.
We will absolutely be conservative on that, particularly until we know how much the cleanup is going to cost us and when we're going to, or at least a ballpark of when we're going to get reimbursed.
And the audits as well, to figure out where we are.
And there's that.
And there's that.
I'm sorry, but on that topic of the audit, the dates I think have passed now for submissions on our request for proposal. And can you give us a sense of where we are on that?
Yes, we were actually going to put it at the next commission meeting, but Beatrice and I were the committee that reviewed the proposals. We received 2 proposals. Both were really equally qualified. One came in with a price that was moderately better and a little bit more qualified, we felt. And so we were going to present that to you at the next commission meeting. Do you want it tonight?
No, just so long as we're moving that, because that's an important piece to get accomplished.
Oh, absolutely. That definitely is.
And I would imagine that with so many cities affected by the storm, they're going to delay the deadline date, or we're actually past the deadline, aren't we? I think that they would probably be have more leeway for cities that have been affected.
Just to be clear, September is usually when they review to see if you've done it, and if not, they give you your December letter. And as long as you're communicating, they work with you. Is that? Do I have that spot on at this point?
Yep.
Okay.
And we've already communicated with them, I believe, that we would be past September.
Yes.
And so
Yes, we did.
they're aware of that. Hopefully we can get, we're now, because we didn't have a September meeting because we were visited by Irma. We will be, going into early October. We'll get the auditors on board and going at that point. Hopefully they can have the 2016 audit done, I would say, late November, December.
Well, if they come in October, it would take them roughly, I'd say, 6 to 8 weeks. So I think by the end of the year. So they might have something to present early January.
Okay.
Are they going to be working on them simultaneously as well? Or not?
The numbers need to roll forward first, so they'd probably hit the ground running in January with the 2017, and I don't. Once they get their feet wet, and then they would kind of know what they're looking for, and I think 2017 should be pretty simple to get through.
And I want to thank you for all your work on this. It's been absolutely, unbelievably tremendous. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. I guess we can go back on to the budget. So.
Okay, well, we were going to address some of the changes that have happened. I know a lot of the audience has been here for the workshops, but as of the last workshop, we made a few changes. One of them was we increased the commission's budget by about $4,500 for education and travel purposes. We decreased the administration budget by about 7% or $52,000. Again, a lot of that had to do with administrative changes and minor changes of reclassifying items and reallocating them throughout the budget to different departments. And like I said, that had an impact of about $52,000. The police budget was decreased by $30,000. Which equates to about 3%. Again, administrative changes for the most part. The operation level has remained relatively the same. We haven't cut anything as far as service is concerned. The building department, we decreased that, and that's a direct correlation to the revenues that the building department bring in. Again, that was based on just what we've collected over the years and anticipation of what our permit fees are going to be. I mean, now that we've had this hurricane, I know we didn't have any structural damage that I'm aware of, but, people might start, changing things, their roofs or improving things. So It might be a little higher than what we anticipated before preparing this budget, but the building expenses would then follow along because we pay out 65% of our building permits to our inspectors.
Just to be clear to the audience, so they understand, one feeds the other.
Yes, the building permits and the building department generally has to be revenue neutral for the most part. Any revenue that you bring in that you do not expend has to be reserved. So it usually is offset with the other, and so that's why we reduce the building department, because there's the offset to the building permit revenue. Code compliance, we increased it about 16%, and that was because we added a part-time code compliance officer. I think it's something that was needed, and a lot of requests came in for that. Public Works, we decreased it by $42,000. We've restructured the department and eliminated the Public Works manager position, and instead we've added an additional laborer for a total of 4. That was a reduction of $42,000 or 11%. The Parks and Recs department, we've increased it $45,000 with the addition of a supervisor, and also we've included $30,000 for the resodding of the athletic field. A capital project, that might be something to be discussed and reconsidered at this point. But like I said, overall, we've reduced the budget by 4% over the current year, which comes at the right time, I suppose. And we can go over the different line items in detail if you'd like. That was just an overall.
I have one item that I need to change, and that is on retirement contributions to FRS. We had talked about increasing the clerk's FRS contribution from the village to a senior management level. And at this time, with the uncertainty we have and all of that, I'd like to go ahead and change that back to the original 7.92%. I want to make it clear that this is not a reflection on the clerk or the senior level of her position. I still believe that absolutely it's warranted. It's just the financial issues that we're having right now with the uncertainty that, make me back off of that. So.
Thank you. Are there any other discussion items that any of the commissioners, I know we've done this through the workshop, but I just want to make clear, are there any other discussion items?
Yeah.
I guess-
Yeah. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Love. Okay, one question is, so all of our transportation surtax, the street lighting, all of that basically comes in as being neutral because we get reimbursed for all those expenses?
I hadn't addressed anything other than the general fund.
Okay.
But we can go to that. So the road fund, which is funded by local option gas taxes and 20% of your state shared revenue. It also has a small transfer from the sanitation department because the personnel that works there does, a portion of their job is related to sanitation. That budget totals $129,000 in revenues, and yes, it is completely offset with the expenses, which is a portion of it is road maintenance, and then the rest is the salaries and benefits that go along with those individuals. And the CITT fund, we'll just jump to that. Again, we're proposing a budget of $128,000, and that is actually the revenue that is estimated by the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust to be allocated to the village, and that has not been, a portion of that is used for the street lightings. We pay all of the street lightings through that fund. The balance of that has not been allocated to any particular project or use.
Right.
And that is for your direction, of course. And as I've told you before, but I'll let the audience know in case they don't remember, that those funds, those $128,000, there's an 80%, 20% split. 80% of it has to be used for transportation and 20% for transit projects. And, at at council's direction, but they are very clear that, you have to use 80% for one and 20% for the other, and the street lighting falls into the transportation portion. So that's available for uses that they direct. A lot of it would be your roads and things like that, which will probably come in handy at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just for your info, we currently have $617,000 sitting in that account.
Is that 617 with this 129?
No. This is 617 as of right now, and then you're getting in another 128,000
Okay.
throughout the next fiscal year.
Sure.
And the sanitation fund, we already adopted that budget back in April, so I won't go into it unless you want me to.
Question on CITT, since that's the topic we're on. Could that 12.5% cleanup cost, because we cleared our roads and to an extent some of that had to do with transportation, is that,
That's
we
a
use
really
CITT
good
for that?
question, and I thought of that today, and I thought, well, let me get an A-OK from the CITT first before I throw that out there, but it's definitely a call that I'd like to make. They had a symposium scheduled, which they had to postpone and reschedule, but I'm sure a lot of municipalities want to know the answer to that, because, these are funds that are sitting there, and if they're allowable uses, that could really, solve a lot of problems for us.
Excellent
That would
point.
be a lifesaver, yeah.
Excellent point. Okay, anything else on CITT? Okay.
Could we go back to the general fund then?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I think we've pretty much hashed out every line by line, and whatever questions we had were answered in the workshop, so I appreciate staff walking us through all those things. But still, we have 197,639 revenue over expenditures. We talk about boosting our reserves, and I would like to see us earmark about 50,000 of that to be budgeted to the reserve, which would leave us still 147, and maybe we could just set that aside until we see what the cleanup cost is and what we will get reimbursed, and what we will need to find money for. Yeah.
I think one of the things I'd like to see happen is we have a lot of things in here we want to do. And with that, whether it was some educational pieces, $30,000 for the field, I think there's a lot of, the car we talked about for the police department, the new equipment, I'm so sorry they're staring at me, the new equipment for the Parks Department. I think we need to kind of hold off and until we find, not come to a grounding halt, but find out.
We've already agreed to do that.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're all clear on that. And I also want to make sure there's a consensus among the commissioners as a group to do that. And so just as a consensus to hold off the expenditures until we know where we're at. Do we have a consensus on that?
Oh, certainly, yes.
Yes?
Yes and no, because there are things that just, the lights have to be paid, things have to happen. And some of these things have been on hold for a long time now. And you're just looking around the rec center, with the tree coming up, the sidewalks all broken up, we need to replace those things. We can't leave that hazard sitting there.
Which I absolutely in concurrence with the issue of damages, because those are things that we have to take care of, their safety. I was referring to items that I think are more, which you can determine can wait.
Yeah, like the $30,000 for the field. We've got a green field now. That we can hold off on until we see if we're going to need it for damages, for sidewalk repairs, or an additional hurricane this year. So,
If we were to use the field as the staging, because we're running out of that, could we then get reimbursed for repairing the field?
that had occurred to me earlier today. I would be hesitant to do that because there's sprinklers, there's more than just lawn
Right,
there.
okay.
There's a lot more, and I don't think FEMA would be, happy to put in our
Or the sprinkler system.
high-rated turf as well as,
And there's some other issues with safety
Yeah.
with children
Yeah.
and having to close down the park because you can't have that there and then have the park open.
Yeah.
And these are discussions we had. I think you're looking at other alternatives of medians that have already been damaged.
we are. We're looking at another staging area on the median right in front of us here, just across 7th Avenue, between 7th and 8th. That will be a staging area. If that fills up, Grubbs has told me already that they think we're going to need a third staging area as well. We have that much debris. And so we'll be looking at other medians as well. As
Do
a
we have the area
possibility.
we're thinking about for the dog park? Off the bridge?
We could do that. There's drainage there, and that would be my only concern is that, that gets pretty mucky.
Right.
And we don't want to not be able to get trucks in and out of there because it's a mud pit,
Yeah.
essentially.
Okay.
So, and I would hate
That's
to
not
also
what-
cover the drain.
Right.
So-
Yeah.
And
Okay.
if I could remind council that even though we adopt the budget, we're not required to expend every single line item. So based on the circumstances, I think that we just move forward very cautiously with the day-to-day operations and hold off on any major purchases or any major issues. Like I know we've got maybe a couple of cars budgeted, new leases and things like that, that we can hold off on and then revisit this 3 months from now or 6 months from now and see where we stand as far as reimbursements from FEMA, the allowable uses from CITT, anything that would alleviate it, and then put us back into where we want to be, and then, see, do we really need those things at the time? Because it's true, we don't want to let things that we've been waiting for and that council has already deemed we need fall off the charts, but at the same time, we'll just prioritize everything.
And I think some of the damages that Commissioner Ross mentioned, like the sidewalks, which are terribly damaged now from the ficus that came up, and those types of things may or may not be FEMA reimbursable.
Yeah, but I mean, those are things that, that's a high liability issue, and we're going to address those.
Right away.
So, absolutely.
And the sidewalks, for example, are a perfect example of something that is CITT allowable. So let's use some of those funds to, the sidewalks are allowable for the transit, I believe, portion of it.
Okay.
And I know we did that, we replaced the sidewalks in other municipalities and, with
part
their
of transit.
blessing.
Yeah,
So-
I was looking at that yesterday, and I thought sidewalks are reimbursable, provided that they are sidewalks that lead to public transportation. So if we had a bus stop in there, then maybe it would be, but I think just sidewalk for sidewalk may not be.
I know that there were issues with unlevel sidewalks and getting those replaced, so maybe it's existing as opposed to a brand-new sidewalk where there wasn't one, but, definitely things that we can ask, and if it's allowable, we'll bring it to you and say, they've given us their blessing, do you want to move forward with this and use those funds, which, are sometimes, some of those uses are a little hard to find projects to fit into them. So.
And I also think your point on doing this stepwise and prioritizing it based upon some of the damages and some of the things we have to do for safety versus some of the things that can wait, I think I feel very confident in our city manager's ability to do that moving forward. Vice Mayor.
I was just going to mention, I have the CITT guidelines in front of me. And for sidewalks funded by the transportation portion are under the following conditions, which are sidewalks constructed as part of a larger road project and standalone sidewalk projects that are part of a network of sidewalks which provide for the urban mobility. The 20% portion would be the sidewalks that are part of a bus stop or bus shelter or sidewalks that provide ADA access.
And we do have damage to a sidewalk on 6th Avenue where there is the bus stop, so that one certainly would fall into that.
And the other one is right by handicap parking in front of the rec center.
When you talk about that sidewalk where the bus stop is on 6th Avenue, perhaps FDOT could take some responsibility for that.
I'm sorry?
The Department of Transportation, Sixth
Oh.
Avenue. Just so we can pool all those funds together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any other, what section would you all like to look at next?
Well, I guess I'm just trying to figure out how to do this, just listening to Beatrice, and we can sit here and we can say that, okay, the day-to-day expenses obviously need to be paid, and I guess the needs need to be paid, and we had a want list. So at this point, should we as the commission give any direction to administration on, like we just suggested, we'll take these 3 months and we revisit, so what direction should we be giving to administration right now for these next 3 months moving forward? I do agree, I'm here at the Parks and Recs, and we already talked about it, I do agree that the $30,000 expenditure for the field, I think what I'm hearing, we're all in agreement that that should be held off on, but should we go through and specifically state other items that should be held off on, or just give a general direction? So that...
I think you mentioned several items, and maybe since you are intimately familiar, as is the village manager, I'd like them to kind of give a suggestion of what they like, what they see first, and then we can perhaps address it as a group. Commissioner Ross?
I think it'll be putting them on the spot, and I know that they've been pulled, at least the manager's been pulled in so many different directions, to right now come up with those items. I think we've given like a general instruction that we should watch what we're spending, and maybe for the next reading we can have a list of these are the things that the manager thinks we could.
That would be better. Thank you.
Yeah, that would have been my suggestion,
Okay.
not to do it maybe tonight, but our next week's
Right.
meeting to have an understanding.
But my concern is that we have $190,000 that are technically unappropriated, and I think we have to label them for some purpose rather than just say we're going to pass a budget and we have an extra $190,000. So I proposed that we earmark, label $50,000 of it to go dedicated to the reserve, to booster reserves, and that the balance, if we can put a line item for hurricane expense, and that's going to be fluid. That'll change as we need it.
Beatrice, do we have to allocate everything or not?
Well, I haven't looked, I'm not sure if the village has adopted a fund balance policy at some point. So I believe in order to do that, you need a fund balance policy in which, you state whether you want certain things assigned, committed, restricted. There's different designations, and then there's different implications to each one of those titles. I believe anything that's committed, it needs a unanimous vote in order to access those funds. So there's things that are unassigned. So because I'm not familiar with whether you have a fund balance policy, I would...
Attorney Hearn, do you want to weigh in on this? Because I don't believe you do. But.
I don't remember us ever doing that.
Right, because on your CAFR, the fund balance is currently listed as unassigned.
Correct.
So maybe we can bring you a fund balance policy, and then we can look at, for example, the $50,000 that you want to put towards reserve and make that committed, so that those funds can only be accessed in case of an emergency, or even restricted, which is a lighter restriction on that. So, but in the meantime, I believe we have first in the manager's department, we have a $50,000 contingency. So if you want to allocate that $50,000 contingency right now to reserves, or to emergency reserves, that's a suggestion. I think we've got a little something in public works. I'm not sure. I want to say maybe it's $10,000.
Yeah, I think it is.
So we can start there until we adopt a fund balance policy.
Is the $197,000 includes that $50,000 in contingency?
No.
No.
The
Oh, so-
$50,000 is a budgeted line item within within the administrative budget.
And I want to suggest that we not mess with that with Public Works particularly. right now, particularly while we're running on overtime, and we're going to have plenty of repairs this year. So the 50,000 from the admin, from that department, no problem with that.
And just to clarify, when the manager stated the cash available in the bank, there is one bank account that you have that is your reserve account, and that's got $400,000 in it right now, which is where I would have assumed to go to for funding until we collect the reimbursement from FEMA, and then we would replenish that account. So I would hold off on assigning anything with the $197,000 just until we establish a policy, because I'm not sure. Maybe Mr. Hearn can shed some light on that, how that would work.
And we're also going to be revisiting this in a couple of months, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And you can revisit it next week, too, and as we think that through.
Right.
I would like to wait assigning anything. I think we're all in agreement that anything left over would end up in reserves anyway. So if we don't spend it, it ends up in reserves, whether we assign it or don't assign it. So I think I'd like to wait until we have a policy as well,
Yeah.
and then we're more consistent with other cities and how we do it. And I'd also like to kind of get a handle, and I'm hoping you'll have this soon, on what our costs are going to kind of look like, and what the 12.5 worst case scenario or best case scenario might be in this case, based upon FEMA's reimbursement with 3 hurricanes.
We will have a best guess next week. It is a moving target, though. I want to quantify that. So.
Thank you. Any other commissioners want to weigh in on this? Do you have a preference how you would like to handle that?
Commissioner Ross?
Yes, Commissioner Tudor?
I guess my impression is just the way it's being done now, just leave it as unassigned. What's ever left over at the end of the year, we put in reserves.
I don't think at this point, I think there's really a need to
can't
segregate
hear.
any of the 197 into any funds.
A little louder.
I said at this point, I don't think there is a need to segregate any of the 197,000 into any type of specific fund, hurricane fund, emergency fund, whatever. I would just leave it as is at this point.
And the other concern I had was if we start earmarking like the 50,000, which I agree, the idea is to make sure people understand we're trying to shore up the reserves, and I think we're all on the same page on that. I think if you put the 50,000 contingency, with everything going on right now, you may very well need that contingency for things we hadn't even thought of. And that's the other thing I'm a little concerned with based upon the hurricane.
Will we have some excess left over from this year's budget?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe so.
Ballpark?
There's, just based on the things that we reflected in this budget, the administrative changes, those actually took place during the current fiscal year. So
Right.
there's already line items in which I know we're not going to expend the full amount budgeted. So I do expect there to be something of a surplus. I don't want to shout out any numbers, because I don't want you to hold me to them. But that's what we're leaning towards. And so I think, all things considered, we're in a healthy place. And as long as we tread really lightly on our operating expenses, and like I said, just the things as needed, keeping the lights on, paying the employees, our day-to-day contractors, and maintaining the level of service that we've been keeping, I think we'll be okay. And we'll revisit this because, we still have 9 more weeks of hurricane season left. So, we're
Don't say
taking
that.
that into consideration.
Don't say that.
Well, these are things that we have to look at. And like I said, we're not going to run out on October 1st and buy cars and, resod the field. So I think that we'll just be very careful with the spending.
Yeah, I just want to say real quick that I've been very, I guess it's hard to say pleased after a hurricane, but I've been very pleased with the daily interactions I've had with the village manager and staff and the decision-making that I've been seeing going on. So I'm extremely comfortable that by leaving the budget as it is, as it stands right now, that the right decisions will be made by the village manager and his staff about not making unnecessary purchases or expenditures. So I'm very comfortable with it. I just kind of wanted to thank him for all the work he's done so far.
I share that as well.
Shall we call for a vote?
I think so. Madam Clerk?
Do we now need to make a motion to accept it? Because we just opened it up for discussion. Is that
Do we
correct?
need another motion?
I make a motion that we accept the budget as presented.
Okay. I'll second it this time.
Okay, so I think we're going to do a roll call.
Mayor Trumpman?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Johnson Sardella?
Yes.
Commissioner Bill?
Yes.
Commissioner Ross?
Yes.
Commissioner Coogan?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, I think, do we have a motion at this point? Some announcements? Actually, I'm sorry, Madam Clerk, do you want to do the announcements?
Yes, next Thursday will be our second and final budget, which will be at 6:30 here in the log cabin. And our next regular commission meeting will be on Tuesday, October 3rd at 7.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. I forgot a second, sorry. Thank you. We're adjourned.